You know the type, right? The person who's read every single book, follows all the experts. They can argue any point. But when it's time to actually do something, they just fail. It's a total head scratcher. How can knowing more actually make you worse at something? Well, that's exactly the paradox we're going to unpack today. All right, so to really get into this, let's paint a picture of someone I'm pretty sure you'll recognize. Let's call him the sophisticated loser. I mean, on paper, this guy is a genius. He's done all the homework. He's read every single important book in his field. Check. And he is constantly plugged in. We're talking a fire hose of information from dozens of different sources, making absolutely sure he doesn't miss a single thing. Double check. And here's where it gets crazy. His analysis? It's flawless. Seriously, he can connect all the dots, see all the angles. But the second it's time to make a decision, it completely falls apart. His results aren't just bad, they are a total catastrophe. And this is the real takeaway here. All that information, all that knowledge, it hasn't helped him. It's actually made him worse. The information isn't the solution, it's become the problem. It's just given him more sophisticated, well-researched ways to fail. So, what is going on here? Is this just some weird personality quirk? Nope. Turns out it's a hardwired limitation of our brains. And there's some really fascinating science behind what we call the overload paradox. Way back in 1956, a psychologist named George Miller figured something out that's absolutely crucial. He discovered that our working memory, you can think of it like your brain's RAM or your mental desktop, can only handle about 7 pieces of information at once. That's it, 7. So what happens when we try to cram more than that in there? Well, our brain doesn't get smarter, it basically short circuits. Our ability to make good decisions just tanks. Our reaction time slows to a crawl, and our confidence, it just shatters. We end up in this state of paralysis. We're not thinking better, we're just stuck. And this isn't just some theory, you can see it happen in the real world. There was this famous study done with jam, of all things, that shows this perfectly. They set up 2 displays in a grocery store. One had 24 different kinds of jam, and the other had just 6. Now, the big display got more people to stop and look, for sure. But the table with only 6 choices, it sold 10 times more jam. More choice didn't help people decide. It paralyzed them. Okay, so what's really wild is that this problem, this feeling of being totally overwhelmed by information, it feels so modern, right? But it was actually diagnosed 2,000 years ago. Yeah, the Roman philosopher Seneca saw this coming, and he had a pretty powerful solution. Seneca warned people against just endlessly and shallowly consuming information. He said that a mind that's always jumping from one idea to the next becomes like a messy library full of other people's thoughts, but it's totally empty of its own real understanding. He used this brilliant metaphor. He said, your mind is like your stomach, right? If you just keep stuffing it with food, more and more and more, and never give it time to rest and actually digest, you don't get stronger, you get sick. And wisdom works the exact same way. It needs stillness. It needs time to process what you've taken in. So the lesson here is simple but profound. Go for depth over breadth. True expertise isn't about knowing a tiny bit about everything. It's about understanding one thing so deeply that it becomes second nature. And that kind of depth, you can't just download it from the internet. You have to build it deliberately over time. All right, so if Seneca's ancient advice still holds up, how do today's top performers actually put this into practice? Well, this leads us to a really powerful idea, the professional's information diet. You know, the difference between an amateur and a professional here is just night and day. The amateur is driven by FOMO, the fear of missing out, so they chase down every single piece of information. The professional, though, they operate on what seems like a shockingly narrow information diet. They are ruthless about cutting out the noise so they can focus only on the signal that actually helps them execute their strategy. And they get this one critical truth. Noise isn't harmless. Every irrelevant article, every conflicting opinion you read, it's not just a distraction. It's actively draining your limited mental energy and planting little seeds of doubt right when you need to be crystal clear and confident. So, how do we actually make that shift from being the amateur to being the professional? It all starts with a simple but honestly pretty radical exercise. You need to conduct a personal information audit. Here's how you do it. It's a 4-step process. First, literally list out every single information source you consume. I'm talking every newsletter, podcast, social media feed, news site, everything. Step 2, for each one on that list, you have to ask one brutally honest question. Does this directly improve my execution? Not is it entertaining or is it interesting, but does it make me measurably better at what I do? Third, you have to be ruthless. If the answer isn't a clear yes, it's gone. Cut it. Finally, step 4, you take those few, powerful sources that are left and you go deep. You master them. You have to remember this key idea. The market or life or whatever your field is, it doesn't reward the person who is the most informed. It rewards the person who is the most precise. And precision doesn't come from knowing more stuff. It comes from knowing what to ignore. It takes courage to look at something and say, you know what, that's interesting, but it's not for me. And that brings us to the final and maybe most challenging question for you. If you were totally 100% honest with yourself and you cut out every single thing that didn't directly lead to better performance, what would actually be left on your list? Think about that gap, the one between what you consume now and what would be on that short, powerful list. That's where your clarity, your focus, and your best results are hiding.